Our focus today is on the way forward for the petrochemical supply chain and logistics. The safe and efficient movement of goods over the crisis would not have been possible without truck drivers, maritime workers, operators at rail terminals and ports, and all the other members of your teams with operational responsibilities.
Well, with that, we are going to kick off this session, and I'd like to hand over to a man who has logistics in his DNA, very literally.
I think it's fair enough to state that the waves and the changes in our industry are coming quicker and quicker. COVID-19 certainly triggers a different understanding for pace and for what could be a new normal. Fortunately, our industry has mastered lots of major challenges in the past together. If anything, the supply chains are agile and more innovative than ever before. Let's all reinvent together the supply chain of the day after tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Peter Hinssen, and I'm really pleased to be here and talk about something that is very close to my heart, which I call the never normal. Are we going back to the old normal? Well, probably not. The old normal probably was disrupted and doesn't even exist anymore. As a matter of fact, I think what we have to prepare ourselves for is a series of fundamental seismic shocks to the system. And what about the world of logistics? Well, I think we can agree we live in an extremely volatile world, and this type of never normal might be the backdrop of how we have to think about strategy going forward. Which companies prospered the most during the pandemic? And this is the top 15. The top 15 are all technology companies. The CEO of Shopify said it brilliantly. Our wildest hopes for 2030 have been pulled into 2020. Diversifying seems to be a key element to really tackle this crisis. Resilience is absolutely key. The Port of Antwerp is a great example of that. Usually a supply chain is something that is quiet behind the scenes. Now this has shown that the supply chain is actually a lifeline. How much time do you as leaders spend on today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow? But reality is 93, 7, and 0. And if you look at it, look at the value. Today is important, tomorrow is important, but the day after tomorrow is crucial if you want to reinvent yourself. I've coined a very simple recipe, which I call vaccine, and it's an incorrectly spelled word. But the V is for velocity. If everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough. Maybe agility is even more important. And creativity is number 3. Innovation is no longer a luxury. We are going to have to fire on all cylinders. And then, maybe the most important, the power of the network. This is not the age of digital. This is the age of networks, the rise of platforms and ecosystems and partnerships. And if you don't have the trust in the network, the visibility and the transparency, you're not going to be able to leverage that. And the last one is experimentation. Best way, and maybe the only way to radically increase the innovation capability of an organization is to lower the cost of failure. A model I call the hourglass model. The top of the hourglass, this is our sense making. This is the input of the day after tomorrow, and then the experimentation to try it. And then it falls into the bottom part of the hourglass. This is where we scale and run and focus on the bottom line. And to put it in Star Wars analogies, you probably need the rebels and the empire at the same time to really thrive in the never normal.
Industry response from the trenches, or I should rather say this time to start off with, from the high seas.
There's been a lot of talk yesterday, today, and around in general about systems. What we've found over the last several months is that the systems have only been as good as the people available to operate them. With all our systems and digitalization, is still about people. The focus is now on the supply chain, in building resilience, in diversifying, increasing flexibility. Possible areas for us to look at are diversifying and re-looking at our supply sources. How robust are they? What happens? Looking at our inventory, is just in time just too late? And looking at our infrastructure, much of which is aging. We need to use the impetus that we have now to improve before we forget. What we're also seeing, unfortunately, is very national agendas where we've got trade and tariff barriers popping up all over the place, and they have the risk of backfiring in unforeseen ways. Our industry prides itself on seeing challenges as opportunities, so I'm optimistic that we're not going to let this pandemic grind us to a halt.
Bertschi has weathered this crisis. And Jan, it's good to see you. It's your turn to take the virtual floor.
So from one day to another, we had to move basically all our offline and well-acquainted half-manual processes over to online. And the most important elements were the two next ones, communication and trust. The usual project implementation routines were heavily so-called disrupted. Plan was skipped, pilot was skipped. Just go for it and adjust while moving forward. Innovative will be the spirit for us for the days and months to come. If a true end-to-end visibility shall be the target, in which I strongly believe, data shall be made available real-time also to receivers. Having our supply chain smarter will give us focus. We can scale our strengths, be more proactive. Let us work on exceptions rather than on routine work. Having a great level of visualization, predictive planning, and focus on the essentials will make our supply chains more robust, even more flexible. We can manage volatility better, but without adding complexity. The chemical industry has the tools to make our world a better place. Think in generations, not in quarters. And with trust, curiosity, and entrepreneurship, our teams will make the difference.
The CEO of Brenntag, they are the global market leader in chemical distribution.
I want to share with you 3 hypotheses I have and taking some of the learnings and how they might reflect into the future. My first hypothesis is about the supply chain networks, and we have heard about networks in this call before. And I call it from just in time to just in case. It was absolutely our global presence, which really, really helped us to draw on the network of supply chains. And we could basically continue to supply to our customers all the products they needed, even in the most difficult period. The globalization, for me, is clearly the basis for the prosperity and for the well-being of mankind. So we have to be smart and create stable networks of supply chains, which are the best insurance for the next challenge, which will come. A second hypothesis is when I talk about the interfaces between customers and suppliers, I call it from segregation to integration. So a strong adaptation will, a strong flexibility on all ends of the chemical value chain has contributed big time for the success of navigating through this crisis. Last but not least, hypothesis number 3 about sustainability and strategy. I'm fundamentally believing that we need to move sustainability from fringe to core in all of our considerations. So we need to make sure that the alignment of our business goals and our sustainability goals are in place. Being it a manufacturer or being a distributor, we are sitting in the same boat. And you only can conquer the challenges which might be ahead of us. And I have no idea if the next challenge has a higher amplitude, has a higher impact than the one we have today, or in which frequency it will come. But it makes me very optimistic that the industry itself is indeed able, out of its self-understanding, that it plays a role, a crucial role for supplying our markets, is acting responsibly and in a positive sense together.
In my opinion, it is a bit like producing cars. I mean, if you would produce one single car, then it would be by far too expensive. But as soon as you get mass in it and a certain standardization, then it starts to pay off by itself. And the same goes for sustainability. I mean, if you would rail one single container from one country to another, would be by far too expensive. But if you can have 30 on it, and even some trailers with light goods, then suddenly it is economical. And the same goes for so many more sustainable initiatives which are in our market possible.
The industry has a tendency to recruit engineers and chemists, and there's nothing wrong with mathematicians, engineers, and chemists. But if we really want to be diverse, we have to be diverse in the disciplines of the people that we hire as well.
The connectivity as such needs to remain agile.